Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Stonks on Rails. In this episode, I'm going to be doing a major refactor of an old Ruby stock scanning program that I have called Stock Trend Finder. And I'm going to be refactoring it by completely rebuilding the app, kind of like how I did with the Stonk Notes application, except that this one is going to be a stock scanning application. This is one of the very first Ruby programs that I wrote, and the code is not very good in the way that it's structured, so I'm going to be doing a lot of refactoring of that. In particular, the front end is very difficult to work with because this was written in an earlier version of Ruby on Rails, originally Rails version 3. I upgraded to Rails 4. The current version of Ruby on Rails is version 7 now, and a lot has changed in the way that JavaScript is handled. In that original front end, I have these really complex templates in a section called reports, and that uses jQuery to do some of the more dynamic aspects of the page. And I'm going to be doing a major refactor of that, trying to modernize this application and fix up some of that really old code that I have so that it's structured a lot better and is a lot more maintainable, and then I could more easily expand on that new code. Because there's a lot that I like to do with this program, but there's a lot of technical debt inside the program that makes it difficult for me to add new types of scans and other ways of recording the notes that I have along with each particular stock. So the first task that I'm going to do is I'm going to start a brand new Rails 7 application, and I'm going to set up all the JavaScript folders and everything similar to how I've done in the other videos I've done related to Stonk Notes, the Stonk Notes journaling program, and the e-voting program that I did in earlier episodes. And then my second objective is I'm going to take the database that I have from my current production setup, and I'm going to load that into a development environment, which I'm going to be using as the raw data from which I'm going to be building new reports and doing some new formatting around those reports. So here I am in the first step of setting up this new application. Basically what I did was I used as a template my last two projects, the e-voting project and Stonk Notes, copying relevant parts of these applications over to my new application that I'm starting, which is going to be in Rails version 7.03. So here's a gem file. I looked through both of those other recent projects, gem files, copied the relevant gems over, reformatted it the way that I want to. I just set up a really basic default route just to get this application working with a very simple controller that will be the landing page, which I usually use, which is the 52-week high report. There's nothing going on really on that page yet, but I've also got, and you can see this in the layouts part of the view templates. Let's bring that up here, layouts. So application.slim. I have JavaScript include tag because I want to be using ES build, and that links to the application.js in my JavaScript directory, which is also going to pull in my style sheets that way. I also brought in the whole build system from my recent video where I talk about ES build and how to run that with Rails 7. So really all of this boilerplate is just kind of copied over from that recent video that I did, and if you want to get an overview of what I'm doing here, I really recommend looking at those other videos. Now, sometimes when I have conversations with other Rails developers and we're making a lot of new applications, sometimes a topic comes up, well, you know what, maybe we should have like a base application template that we could use for all of our, our new applications that we're creating. And I think the problem with trying to have like some sort of a template that you use to spring off new applications is that Rails changes so much, and Stimulus and Turbo, the whole JavaScript world, the front-end world, whatever infrastructure you're using changes so frequently that in the few months that go by between when you create one application and begin the next one, there's going to be some sort of changes to the base Rails project, and then you're going to end up having to update that template anyway. And then what's in that template may vary from project to project. So I really think it's more pragmatic to just look at the recent things that you've developed and just kind of copy paste the relevant pieces of code there. Now let's take a look at the database YAML file. As you can see here, I've also got the .env Rails going there, so I have this development version of my environment file going, which is referenced a lot here in the database.yaml. As you notice here, I have db name as something that could be changed based on the environment variable, because the way that I'm going to set up this application is I'm just going to have this be the front end refactor of my stocks application. So there's actually two parts to this thing that I'm doing here. There's a piece of it where it's constantly running background jobs to get market data, and it's building custom reports off of that I use to find interesting stock trades. And that part I'm going to leave intact for now. What I want to enhance is the front end piece of it, that interface, which has the stock scans themselves. I think that needs the most refactoring and the most work. And that's the area where I could add the most value to my process as far as features go. So I'm going to focus on that. But in so doing, this application doesn't really need to do a whole lot with the backend data. It's mainly going to be reading from the database that's already out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load my production copy of that database into my development environment, and I'm going to base my development of this system around the existing production thing, and I'm eventually going to phase out the older Rails 4 application in favor of this one, which is going to have the better front end. But I'm going to refactor this piece by piece as it goes, and this is just going to be phase 1 of the project. So now I'm going to go ahead and load that production backup of my stock scans database. And on my local development machine, the way that I run Postgres is I have it running through a Docker container. And what that does is it allows me to easily change versions of Postgres if I need to, like if I'm upgrading Rails and the current version of Postgres I'm using isn't supported anymore. It's really easy to just build a newer instance that's running the latest version of Postgres within Docker. I could extract all of my data from the older version and then just load it into the new Docker container using SQL file. And that's essentially what I'm going to be doing right here in this process. Is I'm going to log into that container using the docker command docker exec, and we're going to go to the bash command. So this basically gets us into the shell for that Docker container running my Postgres database. And now I'm going to log into my Postgres server. I'm going to do create database, and we could call this a stock scans development database. So database is created. I'm going to quit. In my setup for this Docker container, as you can see here, I'm running it through a Docker compose file, and I'm aliasing the home development path to so I have a couple of paths here that I'm aliased in. The main thing is that home development inside of the Docker container aliases or links to symlinks to home my name development on the host machine. So that allows me to go to my stock scans project into the db extracts folder, and that's where I have the backup file copied. And it's a 4 gigabyte backup, or 3.5 gigabytes of historical stock data. Now I think we should be able to load the backup just using this command, where we tell it to log in using the username Postgres, use the stock scans development database that we just created, and it'll just run this SQL file. That should work. Okay, so it looks like that data load was successful. Let's go ahead and try to log in to Postgres again, and we'll connect to that database. Okay, so now we'll list all the tables in it. Looks like everything copied okay. I'll run a quick query, and we have some stock data. So it looks like all the data is loaded. So going back to my project here, first thing that we're going to want to do is create a model so that we could access some of that data. And I'm just going to create a model for the daily stock prices. So I think this is all that we need to access one of those database tables. And let's double check that I have that environment set right. Okay, Nope, shouldn't be stock notes development. This should be stock scans development. And I'll go back and restart my server since we had a significant change of settings. Well, actually, you know what? I don't even need the server. All I need for this is to log into the console. So we're going to get out of the Postgres. Let's try to run the Rails console on this stomp scans project. All right, so daily stock price dot last. Let's see if it gives us any problems. Nope, it's able to load that last daily stock price that we had in the system. So our model is working, the database is connecting to that old backup. All you got to do is just recreate the dummy models for connecting to the database tables, and then we should be able to start developing from there. So I think we're at a good stopping point for this video. When I originally started working on this, I wasn't exactly sure how far I'd get with this Rails app conversion and exactly what topic I'm going to cover. Doing a Rails app conversion using this method of copying your code from an old application right into a new application that you're building from scratch is a very involved process. And it may not work for every Rails application that you would want to convert from Rails 4 to Rails 7. Some of the things that you might have to consider are the complexity of the application, the code base size, and how tightly coupled all the code modules are inside the application. So, as I said earlier, I'm breaking up this conversion into two major phases. And in the first phase, I'm going to be refactoring that really sloppy front-end code and adding some enhancements to the front end. And that's going to be my focus. And I'm going to have this new front end running in parallel at the same time as my legacy application, which is still going to be doing the data scraping that I use for my stocks and doing all of the calculations and manipulation needed to build the reports that I look at. So I think this is going to be a multi-part series where I'm going to cover a different technical challenge as I go about working on this and doing the conversion, and I'm sure I'll run into more ideas and topics to cover. So anyway, I hope you found this useful and interesting. If you did, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more content like this. See you next time.